Hi, this is John Townsend. Who am I speaking to?
Hey, John, I think we are ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started.
Sounds good.
All right. Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. We are really excited to bring this webinar series to you today, starting with today's session, How to Survive and Thrive Working with Adolescents. We know you're going to love this one, and you won't want to miss Part 2, Essential Skills for Working with Adolescents, or Part 3, Understanding Characterological Issues that Drive Behavior. Parts 2 and 3 will occur in September and November, so definitely be watching your email for those invites and get registered for those. I am Mike Carr, Director of Compass Rose Academy, and our speaker for this series is Dr. John Townsend. Dr. Townsend is a psychologist, speaker, and New York Times best-selling author who has written or co-written over 30 books, including the very popular Boundaries series. He's a top business consultant and leadership coach, leading people all over the world through his Townsend Leadership Program and training leaders and counselors through the Townsend Institute at Concordia University, Irvine. At Compass Rose Academy, we've had the privilege of not only working closely with Dr. Townsend and learning directly from him, but also getting to see his model transform the lives of teens, families, and honestly, even the staff and therapists that over the past several years have worked in utilizing his therapeutic model in our residential treatment center for teen girls. We love how his model goes beyond symptom reduction and really addresses issues at their core, at their characterological level, which you're going to hear about today and really gain more of an understanding of throughout this three-part series. So we want you to gain as much as possible from today's session. So we are going to save about 10 or 15 minutes at the end for a question and answer time. So please go ahead and post any questions you might have using the question feature on the GoToWebinar window, and we'll leave time for answering your questions at the end. So, all right, for now, I am going to go ahead and get us started. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Townsend. Dr. Townsend, it is all yours.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. And welcome to all of you guys who are in the really challenging, but also very fulfilling career of working with teens. I just enjoyed that so much in the clinical world, and it's never boring, right? But let me begin with, in today's talk, one thing to keep in mind. If you've got your hand out, we're in the introduction phase. I mean, if you're slightly obsessive, then you want to know where we are on the outline. If you're not obsessive at all and you just have nothing but right brain functions, you're probably not even looking at the handout, but that's fine, but we'll stick with the outline. And here's the one thought. You can do a great deal of good for the adolescent if you keep this thought in mind. It's about the future. It's about the future. We do have to deal with, the crises and anything in behavioral or affective ways that are affecting them, cutting, suicidality, acting out, substances. But don't let that get, while you're attending to that, don't let that get to be the number one focus. It's really about a human being that is in flux developmentally, emotionally, cognitively, in brain work. And your real work, the real work of the great adolescent clinicians is that they are helping this unformed yet person to be as healthy and developed and optimized in all capacities, love, relationship, career, as possible, so that the next 80 years of their life is a good, healthy, productive one that's rich and fulfilling. And it's so easy because of the nature of the impulsive part of the adolescent to miss that and just do what Mike referred to as symptom reduction. It's great, you got to do that. But our real calling, our real challenge, our real fulfillment is that I'm helping somebody to be an adult. We can make it past all this craziness, and I am doing what I need to do, that they're going to fall in love and have a family and have their own healthy people in their lives and find something to do with their talents and their career and their gifts and their passion that's meaningful, and go make the world a better place with a product or a service or some way to give back. And they're going to affect their community, and they're going to have really good self-care and live this long, really good kind of like meaningful life. So kind of just keep those 4 words in mind when you're, whatever interventions you're doing with an adolescent. It's really about the future. And it's just kind of a good compass for me, is not to get lost in the crisis du jour, but how is what I'm doing right now in this session with the adolescent or their family, whatever, how is it helping to create a character structure and an internal resilience that will allow them to have a really good life? So kind of an orienting statement, I would say. As Mike said, I really do like to get interactive to find out where you guys are. So I think what I really want to do, Mike, I want to do an audible on this. I'm not going to go the entire, let's say, 45 minutes directly through the outline, because I think it's boring. What we find out about speaking is that people have thoughts and questions and things they want to talk about. So I'm going to stop about halfway through. Let's see, Roman numeral 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to say, okay, what kind of questions do you have? And the reason for that is because we found it in all the brain research about events like this. People are tired of talking heads. You don't even get a talking head. You get a talking PowerPoint. So it can be even more boring. Not saying that looking at me is exciting either. But I think it'll help to get through half the content, then just say, okay, thoughts, questions, comments, and that will also will be able to answer questions you have as people work with adolescents and help that way. But also, it'll give me a sense for where you guys want to go, and I can always contextualize and tailor today and the next 2 talks to that. So that's where we're going to go. Mike, I hope you can pull that off. Roman numeral 1, know your adolescent neuroscience. There is, as you probably know, there's just an explosion of really great science going out in the neuroscience world about research about all types of brain functions, but the world of adolescence we're learning so much about. And it's really important to keep up on it. Now, I hope that you are somewhat information junkies about neuroscience, and you kind of owe it to yourself and your practice to stay up on that, because we're finding out the secrets of the brain from neuroscience of levels we've never known about how teens make decisions, how they give in to impulse, why they give in to impulse, why the unexpected changes in mood. We don't know a lot. We know a lot more than we did. There's so much more to go through. So I kind of want to invite you to, on a regular basis, see what books are out there and also what journal articles are out there. Stay up on it. It's just great. For example, what we've got up on our slide is Dan Siegel's book. I'm sure you've heard of Siegel. He was a pioneer a long time ago. He's one of the first guys that figured out that relational experiences, which is an emotional experience tied into relationship, is a meaningful experience with somebody where there's love and help and compassion, or a traumatic experience with someone where there's fear and helplessness, either positive or negative. But a relational experience, an I-thou between you and a teen and another person, positive or negative, can actually change the hardware of the brain. We never knew this. Siegel was one of the first people that said, you know, the software can affect the hardware, which was news to us. We'd always thought, well, the brain is the brain. It's going to be what it is. It's static, it's not dynamic, and you kind of get what you were born with. And now through the science, we're finding out that relational experiences can actually change it. To use a different metaphor, if you're an iPhone or Android person, the app can change the operating system, which is just phenomenal to think about. That the way you are loved, connected or not connected, have structure or don't structure, can actually affect how the neural pathways transmit data, what hormones are secreted, phenomenal stuff like that. So now to go to the next slide, know your adolescent neuroscience. See all the areas here? There's 1, 2, 3, there's 7 or 8 of the major areas. And I'm sure you've all had your continuing ed training in that, and I don't want to reinvent the wheel, but I want to pinpoint a couple of areas. Look on the on the left side where it says front, right above there it says frontal lobe. That's where life needs to happen as much as possible with the adolescent, but life is not happening there. The frontal lobe, which, as you can see in the diagram, is associated with the highest levels of human thinking, behavior, planning, judgment, decision-making, impulse control, attention. That is the big goal. Now, I'm going to read those words again, and I just want you to like reflect on the adolescents you're seeing and think about their capacity to use these or make them make actions on them. Thinking, okay? Thinking is a big deal. That happens a lot in adolescent. Behavior, well, their behavior is something, but it's not driven by thinking sometimes. Planning, how's homework going? Judgment, should I go out with these crazy kids or not? Decision making, what do I want to do today or tomorrow? Impulse control, I feel this, maybe I need to bonk somebody on the head. Attention, what attention? So you can see that that is not and even a normal adolescent is not strong in the frontal lobe area. It's undeveloped, and more with boys than girls, males and females, and they catch up later. But that's kind of like the big goalpost. Anytime you're thinking about working with the adolescents, how do I develop these things? That's surely going to always be emotional, and we're all supposed to be emotional and intuitive and all that. But how do I get their attention and development to be here? We're going to talk about that a bit. And then down below the word front on the left, amygdala. I was doing a seminar recently talking about it, and I said, let's just shorten it. Let's just call her Amy Gadala. And you got to deal with Amy Gadala with your adolescents. Look at it. Helps the body respond to emotions, memories, and fears. And as you know, whether you call it amygdala or lizard brain or whatever, it's always the fight or flight where the adolescent either gets aggressive and can't use good judgment and patience and temperance, but just moves into aggressive modes with parents or other kids, or a flight where they just run from everything and they can't tolerate tension. And I like to add two F's, F and Frank, to that. There's two F's already, fight and flight. I like to add, from my experience, freeze and fold, because I think it's very much part of amygdala functioning. Freeze would be kind of like the deer in the headlights when the adolescent's really overwhelmed and paralyzed and can't function. You've seen that happen when they're under stress. And you say, how do you feel? I don't know. What do you want to do? I don't know. They truly aren't being manipulative. They don't know. They're in freeze mode. And then fold is when they go into compliance mode. I'll just let the bad guy do whatever he wants to me. I'll let the group do whatever they want to me. I'm not going to even put up with it. And I'm going to allow the bullying. I'm going to allow the bad influence. I'm going to fold. I'm going to go compliant and passive. That's where that happens. And so even though the amygdala is very, very useful because it keeps us in touch with our feelings and our passions and all that, we have to let that part we have to let experiences in the adolescent that are in your office happen to move them from amygdala as much as possible to the front. I just went over that, the stress responses, and just bear that in mind, because you'll see that in your office. Remember, your office is the laboratory and the surgery room. You're learning about the adolescent and what's going on in school and home and with their friends, but you're also the place where it happens via the relationship you have with them, the transference, the attachment, and that sort of thing. All right, number two, make the alliance. Whether it's adult psychotherapy or just whether it's adolescent psychotherapy, nothing really happens without an alliance. There has to be basic trust built. The adolescent is primarily suspicious of the adult or the parent. A very small percentage of adolescents want to be in treatment. They'll say, I'm struggling, I'm hurting, I'm depressed, I don't like my life, I'd like to get treatment. And they tend to make the alliance very quickly. The high majority have been referred from either from the parent or from the school system or from the court mandated system. So they have a natural disaffinity to you. You represent the parent, you represent the authority figure. And even if they're healthy, adolescents are already pushing against authority figures. That's just developmentally appropriate. They're supposed to challenge, start to think for themselves, eat the fish, spit out the bones. Well, you're in there now, and that natural disaffinity they have, that pushback they have, is exacerbated because they never asked to be there, and they're taking their time away from their life to be with you, and you're going to ask them difficult questions, this sort of thing. So you see on the slide, There are basic relational needs right now that you can begin to apply to them to make the alliance. So there's trust built. This is a model I have in a book I'm writing right now. It'll come out sometime in mid 2019. It's called Energy, How the Right People Fuel Your Success in Life, Love, and Leadership. It has a lot to do with neuropsychology as well as attachment theory, as well as character theory, about that people are the actual ingredients of growth and nutrients of growth. Just like your body needs a certain amount of calcium every day so that you don't get bone loss or bone density loss, or like you need a certain amount of vitamin. What's the one that causes? Oh, iron. You got to have a certain amount of iron. And if you don't have certain dosages of iron every day, you could be prone to anemia. The same is true in my model of the growth world, personal growth world, developmental growth world. Is like my model is about, there are about 22 nutrients that we transfer back and forth to each other, and you've got to have them at certain dosage levels, from friend to friend, parent to parent, spouse to spouse, dating relationship to dating relationship. And if the transfer is healthy and you're getting what you need from the people around your life, just like vitamins and supplements, and if they're getting that from you, life goes very well. You solve problems, you have good careers, you feel good, you've got good energy. That's why it's called energy. Here's the things that I'm just going to go over the list very quickly, and they kind of go into, I think, what really helps with the attunement with the alliance process. Acceptance, you're okay with me, no matter how many times you screwed up. Attunement, I really think that's of all these is probably number one of the alliance, is to enter the adolescence world. Attunement is different from, it's kind of a first cousin to empathy, but it's more targeted empathy. Attunement is following the feelings wherever they may go. It's not global or vague. It's you tune into detachment, to contempt, to anger, to sadness, to underlying feelings, underlying defensive feelings. And the more you can attune to them and verbalize the attunement of the adolescent, like, I can see that you really don't want to be here, Sally. I mean, what's that about? Well, F you, I shouldn't be here. I understand that. So your experience has been that this has been a bad thing for you, or it's taking you out of your life. Well, yeah, it's taking me out of my life. While you are attuning to their contempt for you, the therapist, which you got to be able to do as an adolescent therapist, while you're doing that, you're entering their world of how much they hate what you're doing with them. You're helping them. You are coming on the same page with the adolescent who's pushing against you. It's kind of like jujitsu. You're doing a flip with them, and all of a sudden they begin to go, they're not talking me out of this. They're saying it does suck, and it's hard for me. Validation of experience is just your feelings reported, right or wrong. Don't dismiss my feelings. Identification, I've been there too. Minimize that as a therapist. I think therapists that do a lot of, here's my story, here's my journey, here's my angst, not more than 30 seconds every now and then. Otherwise, it becomes narcissistic, and then the child's got to listen to another adult talk about, like Dana Carvey on Saturday Night Live. Well, then I had to walk uphill from my home to school, uphill both ways in the snow, barefooted, and we loved it. No, they just don't want to hear your story. Just validation identification every now and then. Yeah, I've been there, I've struggled. Containment, you can vent to me. You can't hurt me. You can't be physical, but you can tell me how frustrated you are with your life or me. I can handle that. I'm a grown up. Clarification, let me understand what you mean by that. Let's pinpoint that a bit. Understanding, okay, I'm starting to get your entire life experience, perspective. Here's another way of looking at things. Frame it up differently. Encouragement, I believe in you, and you've got to do hard things, and I believe in you even more than you believe in yourself. Comfort, you have some losses in your life, losses with mom, losses with dad, losses with friends, losses with self-image. I'm there. I can be with you in the sadness. Forgiveness, I can help you get off your own back and let other people go. Feedback, here's some things that I think you might help you to know. Wisdom, here's my experience of what the research says about some good decisions. Confrontation, I'm really concerned about you. I think that something's going to happen if you don't change the way you look at things. Advice, here's some things that might help. Structure, we need to be organized, you need to come on time. Let's get your chores, make sure your chores are done. I know that you don't like school, I know you don't like chores, but structure is important. Celebration, way to go, you did a good job, you were vulnerable, you opened up. You did do your homework, you said no to that friend, let's pop the cork. Well, you can't really pop the cork with an adolescent. And then challenge, let me push you a little bit. I want to be able to make sure that we're making you do things that are kind of hard for you and for anybody else. If you look at this list, and to make the alliance. I have others in the book, but this is kind of the majority of them. If you go from left to right, you can see that they kind of move from sort of softer and more grace and more connecting with, and they get more and more built on the truth aspect, like you drop down to feedback, wisdom, confrontation. That was intentional because you really can't hear what a grown-up says unless you feel like they've entered your world. And then you can start to hear truth and feedback and challenge and interpretation and those sorts of things. So make the alliance. That's going to be your first job in the first few sessions. Is you don't fake it and act like you're their best friend, and you allow them to sort of resent the process. But get to their I've always found it helpful to either get to their resistance and how much they don't like this, and let them know that's okay with you and you understand it, and also get to the scared, hurt part underneath too. The alliance is, it sounds like sometimes you feel insecure, and sounds like you sound like sometimes you get scared. You don't know if you're a good person. So you accept the resistance and the flipping you off, but you also go underneath and say, I think there's other things going on. It's making the interpretation of the deeper, more vulnerable feelings. Specific tips, I've found several things helpful. It's really helpful to know their culture. Most adolescent therapists I know are really good about culture. Music, dress, fashion, that sort of thing. And now that we live in an extremely internet age, they're all over their phone all the time, and they're in their room on their iPad or their laptop or their phone. And so understanding where they go online, I know it's okay to say, well, I'm not really a techie person, but if you're going to be an adolescent therapist, you got to know about what they do and where they go, and Instagram and Snapchat, and there's going to be some other ones, in a year from now that we never knew about. So be culture aware, culture informed, and be tech informed. Another tip is when the session starts, I have found it really helpful to not say anything. Just smile, be friendly, have them sit down. Because the teen is waiting for you to tell them what to do so they can say, no, I'm not going to do that. Remember, the teen is more into the no than the yes. They are kind of built around, I don't know what I want, but I know I don't like you, and I don't like this. I don't want to, I don't like to, that's lame, that sucks. They're more into the negatives, but you can't get into the positives. So don't sabotage yourself and sit down and say, how was your week? Oh, it was lame. Just sit there. Give them nothing to say no to, smile, and look at them. And what happens is, I've seen it happen a million times, they'll get a little uncomfortable, and they'll say, you don't say anything? Say, no, I'm not, and smile. And what happens is that part of themselves that's just dying for a relationship begins to talk about what's really on their mind. Maybe what's on their mind is not what happened last week. Maybe it's what happened last session with you. Maybe it's a memory when they were 7 years old. So don't stack the deck here. I remember when our kids were small, we were my wife and I raised boys, which are nonverbal beings. So, drive my wife crazy. Come home from school, how was your day? Good, lame, bad, sucks. One word stuff. And she's like, oh, I wish we'd had girls. And I'm saying, okay, we can work on this. But she didn't get the data. So I created what's called Dad's required, I think I called it with a death march, where you had to walk with Dad singly, not one boy at a time, around the block before dinner, or you couldn't have dinner. I'm kind of being kidding here, but before dinner, you got to walk around the block with Dad. And I didn't say anything. And the first half of the walk around the block, my son would go, I hate this is lame. I want to go play video games. What are we doing this? Second half of the block, it would start leaking out. The attachment would start leaking out. One of the kids would go, I don't think the coach likes me, or I'm so bad in geometry, or there's this girl, or whatever. And we would just talk about what was really going on in life. And inevitably, and if my kids were on the line right now, they would tell you this, inevitably we get back to the front yard of the house and they would say, I need to go around another time. Why? Because the attachment came through, the alliance was made. I didn't force it. I didn't say talk about these 3 topics. So nothing to resist. Evaluate and act on dangers and severity. As you know, and you've had training on this, plus continuing to, we need to always be well aware of what's going on, the best practices there. Risk of harm, self-harm, suicide risk, adolescent suicide rate is high. We know it's higher than it needs to be. Mike, do we have PowerPoints and all this stuff, or is it just the one slide here?
Yeah, that one's just that one slide there, John.
Yeah, and the reason that Mike and I didn't want to go into that is I don't want to reinvent the wheel with you guys. You're professionals. So we know you got to determine risk of harm. You got that you're trained. You got that when you're working on your master's, your doctorate, and understand the risk of self-harm, cutting, and how cutting can be dangerous, as well as the other specific modalities and methods, from substances to self-violence, hanging, shooting, knives. I mean, really scary stuff. The rate is higher than the normal human or the normal American. And access to weapons, you've got to be really careful about that because the impulsivity is great. And always remember, and I don't need to tell you guys this much, always remember that an attempt, even if it's manipulative, needs to be treated as a serious attempt. So many kids have died because even though it was a cry for help or was manipulative or whatever, they messed up. So I'm highly conservative about that. Whatever your institution you're working with, private practice, government, church, NGO, however you're working, make sure you understand the protocols of safety and that you've got everything in line if something happens or if you hear about it. And then diagnose from the symptoms. The basic symptomatology that the children, adolescents are referred to are attention, behavior, mood, traumas, and this sort of thing. So look at, are they coming in with the inability to attend to school or attend to tasks at home, homework, chores, this sort of thing, because you might have something either in an ADD or ADHD spectrum, or you might have something that's got to do with depression, or it's got something to do with anxiety issues. Behavior issues, conduct. Behavior is very important because it's so visible. Are they impulsive? Are they making impulsive problems, using, defiance, this sort of thing? Are they compulsive? Some kids, there are more impulsive adolescents these days than compulsive, but are they compulsive like the way an anorexic gal would act, where she's counting calories in a granular way? Or are they somewhat OCD and highly rigid? And how are they just handling the normal tasks of life, school, chores, and that sort of thing? And also, are they being impulsive and hurting other people? Mood issues, where are the affects? Are the moods extreme? Then you got to look at the possibility of bipolar, but also you got to look at depression or a lack of individuation, or you've got to look at a child that's disconnected. And the way you look at moods is, number one, are they overreactive to the circumstances? What I call circumstance appropriate or circumstance non-appropriate. Like when they make a D on a report card or a paper, do they just flip out? Or when somebody's rejected by a boyfriend or girlfriend, do they lose a whole week of functioning? That's an overreaction as opposed to being just sad and upset. Or do they get really mad and choose people off when there's a slight narcissistic injury and they get in fights? Or do they have an underreaction and a lack of access? Some kids are shut off. A lot of kids in the schizoid world, where they're disconnected, have like zero responses. And then you're not dealing with somebody who's overreactive. They have no access to their pain, their hurts, their loves, their passions, and a lot of that has to do with their internal structure. And then signs of trauma. Look for PTSD signs. You're all trained in that. Look for anything with either flashbacks or auditory hallucinations, or having strong responses to stimuli that show fear, panic, and amygdala functioning, basically. And another specific point is look at how they handle relationships. How the teen, and this is you're gonna get some of this just from the report. They may not tell you this thing if they're not forthcoming, but talk about the key relationships they have in their life, and talk to whoever's referring. If you can get a session with mom and dad, I do like to get a session with mom and dad. Some therapists don't, but I just think it's so hard to get the data from the child, from the teen, for so many reasons. How are they handling the relationship at home? Are they decently respectful, decently challenging with mom and dad? Are they kind to siblings? How are they doing with schoolmates and school class people? How are they doing with coaches, teachers, and this sort of thing? Look at the relationship and look at the character that they're picking. Are they picking kids that are decent that maybe make mistakes, but they're fundamentally decent kids? Or are they picking kids that could be scary and toxic for them? So those are the things to diagnose from. So it's a good time just to say what kind of thoughts or questions. Remember that in the adolescent world, there's no such thing as a bad question. What kind of questions do you have at this point that we can talk about?
Yeah, John, I'm going to jump in here. If people missed at the beginning, just a reminder that as you do have questions throughout the webinar, you can go ahead and submit those using the question tab on the GoToWebinar. I've got a couple that have come in here. So, John, one question for you is back to the fight, flight, freeze, or fold that you talked about. When an adolescent is coming from that place of the lizard brain that you mentioned, how do you begin to work with them, and what are some things or tips you have for bringing them through that while also taking care to maintain the alliance that you've built?
Actually, those work together very well. Thanks for asking the question. Getting them from amygdala to prefrontal cortex and the alliance are sort of like in lockstep with each other. There's not a lot of conflict because what they need right there is attunement. Let me just give you some key phrases that are very helpful to use in an authentic way. When we started talking about what happened at school, it looked like you kind of shut down, Sam. Looked like you got scared, or your eyes are kind of watering a little bit, or you're so angry you could just kill somebody. Now, what I'm doing is I'm attuning to the affect that I see that's in the amygdala function because it's so intense and there's no rational reason to it. It's nothing but sort of it's unmetabolized primitive affect, but I'm entering it and saying, now here's what I see. You want to kill somebody, or you don't like yourself, or you're just beating yourself up now, or you feel like you're all alone. Attunement, then, number one, it doesn't bring them straight to the prefrontal cortex, but what we're finding is they don't feel alone in the amygdala. That is just step one, is when they're in the amygdala, life sucks. It's awful and bad, and they're catastrophic, and it's all falling apart. I have no life, and there's all this. But alone is the big deal. But when you attune to it, they're in their brain going, it's awful. And then they go, she gets it. She's like not trying to preach to me or change me or telling my thinking's illogical. She's sitting on the bench with me while I'm in this awful thing. That's a huge first step to the brain being able to relax a bit, because when I know I'm not alone, then I have strength. That's what all the research says, is what my new book's about, is we are strengthened by the character of the people we're with. So she's on the bench with me in this awful place I'm at. And then you continue attuning. And then what you'll notice is that 9 times out of 10, the adolescent will see the intensity of the affects beginning to ameliorate. You'll see respiration slowing down. You'll see the strong emotion calming down a bit. And you'll see the tension, I don't know, maybe like arms tied up and making fists and curl up or whatever. You'll see a body relaxation. And that lets you know then you get to the next level. So that's when you want to investigate, say, okay, and I'm very much big on in the moment with the adolescent. Instead of saying, well, let's go back to what happened in school. Don't go back to what happened in school right then. Say, it sounds like you feel a little bit different. You feel a little bit different? Yeah, a little bit. Tell me about kind of what happened when you were in that place and we started talking, and then it seemed to be a little bit better. And then they say, well, you kind of got it. I mean, you're an adult, so you don't get everything, but I felt like you knew how rejected I felt and all this. And you put words on it. Yeah, you felt rejected. You felt unheard. You felt like taken advantage of. And a lot of times you give them these words because they don't have the right words. You have to give them the words with the symbols. And then they kind of go, yeah, I did. Now you give them the words for the experience, and then you say, well, it sounds like you were able to kind of like not be so caught in that moment when we started talking about it. And they go, yeah. Now this is not about you getting strokes to say, isn't it great that I'm in there with you? No, that's bad. But then it's kind of, okay, well, I feel like we sort of understand what we went through. Let's talk about last week when you got bullied or victimized or whatever. So that's just kind of how that works. It's very effective.
John, how about with a particularly kind of a stereotypical angry kid in therapy where you kind of know there's these underlying sad parts or hurt parts, but all you're getting in therapy is just that surface anger, and they kind of deny that there is that underlying sadness. What would you say? How long can that take to get to that, and how do you best get to those underlying hurt or sad parts?
Um, there's mild, there's moderate, and there's severe, right? There's mild anger defenses, moderate and severe, and it can be a long time and it can be a short time. Um, I mean, there are some kids that are untreatable unless they go to inpatient because the rage is so strong, and most of them have very strong attachment disorders. We'll talk about attachment stuff at some point. And since they have attachment disorders, all they have is rage. The lonely self is so hard to access, and some of them just can't be helped in an outpatient setting. They have to be inpatient where it's like 24/7 therapy and groups and help and that sort of thing, which, by the way, why I believe in Compass Rose, because they will do that. They will take the kid and immerse them in the healthy interventions that they need scientifically and attachment-wise until the kid gets to that lonely part. But I would say that session after session, I believe in once a week therapy at least, just to let you know where I stand on that. I mean, sometimes it's impossible, but if you're seeing the kid once a month or once every 2 weeks, sometimes it's just the way it is, logistics and money and all that, geography. The problem with, we got to be realistic about that. The problem is that seeing them less than once a week, you kind of have to play a lot of catch up, because that's 2 weeks to talk about. This happened, and this happened, this happened, and in like the last 10 minutes, you finally get to do some process work. So as much as possible, not a perfect world, much as possible, see them once a week, at least. And when you're doing that, I would say the way you know this isn't working and we got to shift to something with more structure and intensity like Compass Rose. Most cases, if it's just rage, I'd say probably after like a couple of months, 2 or 3 months, especially if they're doing things that are destructive. You got to maybe do it earlier, like drugs or violence or whatever. But suppose they're not doing those things, that would call you to go to more structure. But just the rage itself, yeah, after 2 or 3 months, you got to say, I'm not enough, and we either got to double or triple up on the sessions and find something else for you. But in the norm, in the mild to moderate spectrum, before that period of time, one attuning interpretation does not a character fit. I said that very poorly. You have to do this multiple times. You've got to be the dripping faucet of attunement. So F you and F the horse you rode in on, and I don't know. Okay. So sound like you hate being here, and sound like you're really mad at everybody else in your life. I got a reason to be mad. I got a reason to be mad at you. I'm wasting my time. Yeah, it sounds like this is just kind of like no value to you at all. Yeah, it is. And then, a really good thing to say after you kind of interpreted the anger a few times is, I think I would feel a little bit helpless. I'm being made to do this. And yes, I do. Well, helplessness is hard. It makes you feel like you're, a little kid. It makes you feel like you're weak. And you can get to that sometimes. Or interpret, if you see it, I would also feel very alone. It sounds like, your parents referred you here for a reason. And I'm not alone. I don't like people. I like to wear goth clothes and to think about death. Well, I understand you do. But alone's not fun. And it feels like to me that I do hear your anger. I hope you understand. I respect your anger. But I'm also feeling a lot of aloneness underneath there. Like, and I've really got great friends that love me and love me for whom I am. And drip it, come at all ends of it. Helpless, alone. I feel vulnerable. It seems like sometimes you feel like other people can hurt you because maybe you can't take care of yourself. They'll flip it back. But if you stay connected, keep the eye contact, move toward those other pieces, and you're being sort of tentative about it. You're not saying, oh, here's a lonely person under it. Let me hug that little girl, that little boy. That's kind of crazy talk for a therapist. But just to say, it's possible, as I'm listening to you, that I know you're mad and you don't feel like you need any help, but I know your history. I've heard it from your parents at school, and I know all the struggles. Nobody can feel great about that. And sometimes in the office, I'll see that there's a tear in your eye every now and then. If there is, don't lie about it. Or it seems like you soften up a bit, or you look a little bit scared. And there's these little cracks as you keep attuning and using the history you have. There's just always the two. You know the facts. You know they got a bad life from the history. And you also know that if you keep attuning as well as using your history, there is a part of that adolescent that is just dying to be vulnerable. For somebody to finally say it's okay to be weak and admit you're not ready for life and you're scared and you're not happy and it's really, really crappy. And they're just dying for that. It's covered by many layers of resistance and acting out and self-medicating and anger. But you got to keep your eye on the ball. That in that part of that person, the way I like to look at it when I'm doing the work is that vulnerable part is sitting there in a little room all by themselves, deep inside that adolescent's mind, sitting in a chair, listening intently for, is she going to stick with me? Does she get it? Is she going to push through this? Is he going to get this? Please reach me. While the outside behavior is 100% the opposite direction. You got to have the thick skin because you got to really be focused on that little girl or little boy sitting on the chair in that room saying, find me, I'm scared. That's how we do it.
I love that. I think that's so true and right on. Do you want to jump from there, John, into the navigating into the underlying character levels, and then I can hang on to some questions yet and bring them back at the end?
Part 5, help them navigate internally to the next level of development, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and we're going to be kind of talking about that, especially in talk number 3, but I did want to give you sort of a 30,000 viewpoint on that. I believe in what's called a depth or characterological view of adolescent development. That this is kind of more of I come from a dynamic depth viewpoint, and I love cognitive interventions, and I love systems interventions and Gestalt and all that, and I love the neuroscience. But I kind of look at the adolescent through a psychodynamic developmental lens, and there are 4 developmental stages that not only the adolescent has to go through, but every human being has to go through, and we're all sort of in that space now. And that you can see in the on the slide, attachment, separation, integration, adulthood. Attachment is the first stage of development, which is basically bonding and need-based connection. Like it all started with Bowlby's work, the guy the psychoanalyst that had the geese running around following his boots in the English garden. And the fact that we are designed from the womb to connect, to reach out to relationship as the source of all good things. First attachment comes to the mother, where the child realizes, I don't know who this person is, I don't know what a person is, but I know that I'm warm and I'm fed and I'm loved and I'm safe. And the child begins to feel very deep feelings of connection and need to the mom. Then it moves to the dad, and then it moves to siblings and friends. And then over life, it goes to the social system, neighbors, schoolmates, teachers, institutes, sports, churches, and then it moves out to finding your own person that you love and starting your own family, that sort of thing. Attachment begins everything. And basically, you've got to, on a diagnostic level, to look at, well, could the struggle that this kid's going through, remember we talked about diagnosing from the symptomatology, could these things be driven by aloneness, isolation, and sort of like what you see in the world of attachment, or either I cannot need, I can only not need, I can be self-sufficient, more the schizoid dynamic, or it's trust. I do feel needs, but I can't trust. I long for love, I long for safety, but I have been burnt so many times I can't trust. But they're a little more advanced developmentally than the person who can't need. Again, we're talking about this in session 3. So could these symptoms be tied into that? Could the symptoms be tied into separation? Could their pain, their acting out, their rebellion, their internal, negative thinking? Separation is the capacity to have one's own voice, make one's own decisions, have boundaries. individuate, differentiate, to be able to say, I have my own opinions and my own thoughts, and I'm okay to express those and behave that way. And if if a teen has problems in separation, you will find them having often symptoms of depression, anxiety, acting out, conduct, school, not because they're disconnected emotionally and detached, like in the first developmental level, but because they don't feel secure being a separate person. Very important to understand that. Then integration. Integration is a term having to do with to be able to put negative realities about self, others, and the world together with positive realities, self, others, in the world. That healthy people can live with, their own successes as well as their own screw-ups, and they forgive themselves and move on, and they're happy about their good things, but failure doesn't get them down. They learn from it, and they are okay. That's the self part. But the other part, healthy adults are able to have people that they love, that they appreciate, they respect, who also let them down and mess up, and they can forgive those people and move on and have good relationships. And in the world, they know the world isn't a fair place. The world is a good place. Woody Allen said the world is really a messed up place, but it's still the only place you can get a good steak. So it's still an okay place to live. So they can accept that there's tsunamis and depression and disease and moms dying at 2 years old that leave a kid without anything, and it's sad, but they don't have this kind of like protest about that. They just understand they can adapt to it. Well, adolescents don't have the ability to integrate. When you let them down and you screw up, it's hard for them to come back because you're all bad now. Or they have a negative thought about themselves. It's hard for them to go, but I'm still a good person. They're all bad now. So the negative overwhelms the positive. So it's the need to be able to integrate. I'm good and bad, you're good and bad, the world's good and bad, life's okay. And many symptoms can be tied into the inability to integrate. And then you see the fourth one, adulthood, which is the ability to relate to people on a mutual level as we're both equal. As opposed to I'm the child and you're the parent, and so I'm always the dummy and I need your approval and you don't respect me. The child-parent position is not a good one for the adolescent, nor is the adolescent position, which they are, which they're just kind of, they defy all authority, they defy cops and coaches and teachers and parents, and there's that healthy defiance where you got to figure out what you feel and think and believe. But a lot of teens get themselves in trouble because they hate all authority. That's a problem. And then some teens, not many, but some are in the parent role where they want to micromanage the other kids, and they're always walking around taking names and being the perfect kid. And the other ones that, when I was a kid, we used to beat them up behind the bus because they always told the teacher on us. Not a lot of those, but there are some. But the point is, a healthy teen can relate well to adults and peers and feel mutual and respected and equal. And when they can't do that, when they're either in the child one down position or the adolescent position, they get in trouble. Now, big part of this is you can, and I'm going to say this several times during our series, you can have the exact same symptomatology of behavior, thoughts, mood, relationships, and it be driven by a different one of those four. So don't ever make the mistake of all anger is about sadness, or all acting out is about self-esteem. You got to be able to tie it in. And the great adolescent therapists are the ones that go, yeah, the depression is very similar between Sam and Sally, but hers is driven by disconnection. His is driven by lack of separateness. Now you're being a good therapist because you are treating the disease they have, let's call it the bacterial infection they have, which is the character deficit. You're treating that, and you're not just treating the symptom. And the next stage is to help them navigate internally to the next level development. And the way we've constructed this at Compass Rose is bonding is attachment. See that top thing that's pointing up in this nice compass graphic? I love this graphic. And then there's boundaries, which are the separation, individuation. That would be east, wouldn't it? And then reality is the ability to integrate negative reality and still feel loved and happy and safe and not depressed. And then competence is the ability to be mutual and adult with other people and take your place in the world. So can't overstress when you do diagnostics, don't ever think that it's one thing. It's never always self-esteem, and it's never always, loneliness. It's one of four things or some combination. Do the work, get supervision. Always go, the depression is exactly like this other one, but this one's driven because they beat themselves up so hard into shame when they mess up. That's why they act out, and you will heal kids the rest of your career. All righty. Part 6, operate from technical neutrality. Technical neutrality refers to an equidistant position within the intrapsychic structures of the adolescent. And I'll say that again, an equidistant position, taking as a therapist an equidistant position between the different intrapsychic structures of the adolescent. What it means is if the kid's id is coming out, the childish, I hate everybody, I'm screw everybody, I'm going to act out. You understand that and you're tuned to that. But also if their parent comes out like, that was a bad thing, I'm mad at myself, you listen to that too. But you don't take the side of one or the other. See, some therapists, especially in the adolescent world, we've always tended to either be, I'll be like you and dress like you, and yeah, your parents suck, and I like your music. And we over-identify with the child id part, and it's sort of like all parents are bad, all authorities are bad, and that's not a neutral viewpoint. Now what you're saying is you're helping the child regress and saying, yeah, stay immature as long as you need to. But then there's some go to the parent side and like, your mom and your dad and your teachers are right about this. You got to get your act together. Well, then the adolescent's child part's gone. The really good, the really wonderful adolescent therapists are the ones that understand the child position, and they also understand the parent position, which is responsibility and morality. And also they understand when the child is low energy or higher energy, they don't take a stand one way or the other. And when the child is inward or outward, more introverted or extroverted. They like all parts, and they are equidistant from all parts. They don't like take a side and say, I like this part of you better. They want to develop the whole adolescent. Very, very important. And then help them shift from behavior to affects to verbalization. What I meant by that is a lot of times they come in and they're not able to articulate their feelings and say, a 3-year-old doesn't say, I'm jealous of my 1-year-old sister. I feel displaced by her. She's nursing and I'm not. They bonk their sister on the head. It's behavior. They don't have words. It's simple. So it's our job to help them. We attend to the emotion, and we give them words for the emotion, like I was talking about earlier, that case, where sometimes I'll bring out, I've got a list that I use. I have an assessment tool I'm developing that's going to come out in a couple of months, the TPRAT, Townsend Personal Relational Assessment Tool, where you learn about your character diagnostics and you give yourself a number of skills to get better and healthier. And I've got a list of 100 emotions in the back of it because so many people, adolescents included, all they know is happy or sad or mad. They got like 3. And you got to learn the nuances. So part of your job is, that sounded irritating. That sounded like impotent. That sounded jealous. When you put words on emotions, now they can verbalize, and then you explore the deeper emotions, which tend to be the more tender ones, and then create new experiences. And my point there is, I'm really big on the mismatching experiences where you enter the child's pain. You felt so rejected, or you felt so controlled, or you messed up and you beat up yourself, or you lost control and now you regret it. And you say, but I'm okay with you and I want to help you. And I don't really see you that way. Yeah, you messed up, but I'm not judging you, and I wish your friends hadn't judged you. And you create the mismatching experience, which is that, oh, my shrink gets it about me. They're not saying it was okay. They're not saying I didn't do it, but they're not beating me up like the world does, and they're not beating me up like I do. And we're finding out in the neuro work that mismatching experiences, actually, this is the cool part, is while it does a shift in the neurotransmitter, while in the actual cell that holds the memory, it keeps the objective memory of the bad event or the trauma or whatever, but it strips off the pathological affect of you're all bad, I'm judged, you're alone, and it layers back in a new healthy emotion. So you keep the objective memory of what happened, but you see it in a new light, in a healthier way, to feel more hope. Very, very powerful stuff. And put words to it, we talked about. And the more you do that, the adolescent begins to take their own space, and they begin to move more empowered, make better choices. They don't feel alone. You're giving them more tools. They move up the developmental spectrum from attachment to separation, individuation to confidence, and you do a good job. So, conclusion, it's a great life. It's challenging, but goodness gracious, you change lives forever. Every now and then, I'll see somebody at a conference and they'll say, you know, I was 14 and you worked with me, and then I'll go, well, that was a while ago. Yeah, they'll say, yeah, I'm married and got kids now. And that was what I needed. And they're helping people in their own lives now. Very, very fulfilling work. So, where are we, Mike? Is it question time now?
Yeah, so again, if you guys are out there and have more questions, feel free to send those in with the questions tab, but I do have a few for you here. So one is kind of back to your list of relational needs, John, and working with a specifically shame-based client, where should a therapist focus in terms of relational needs in this area to really get through that shame?
Nothing works better on a relational nutrient level. Remember, this is a vitamin or mineral this adolescent needs for particular need. The best relational nutrient, nothing's close, is acceptance. And what is acceptance? Acceptance is conveying that even though the person did make a mistake or fail or whatever, that two things. One, I'm okay with you, and two, I want to help you. Because shame is saying you'll never make it, you're damaged beyond help, you're permanently this way, there's a permanence to shame. And so nobody's going to be with me and I'll always be this way. Acceptance says, and remember, you never deny. I hate it when we, as therapists, we kind of feel so compassionate, we minimize what somebody did. Like, well, I know you robbed the bank, but you know, insurance will pay for it. That's really bad. You got to stay with the reality and the impact. Sure, you acted out and you caused a lot of damage, but I'm not mad at you. You and I are okay, and I'm going to help you with it. And it begins to chip away at the shame barrier as there's one person in life that's not seeing me as all bad and unlovable, because shame basically says you're unlovable.
That's great. I think another question, John, is working with teens where you mentioned they tend to be struggling in impulse control in this area. And so how does a therapist kind of balance that line of managing holding accountable and even confrontation or challenge while also maintaining that supportive alliance?
Probably the best rule of thumb, I think, for adolescents is, by the way, they're doing work on my building here in my office. And so if you hear scraping and scratching, I don't have an adolescent attacking me right now. It's just a bunch of guys outside my window. Is this, soft on the person, hard on the issue. Soft on the person, hard on the issue. Heather, I know that you used again, and I know you stole the car and went out and joyrided and got some trouble with the police again. And I think there's going to have to be consequences for that, and I support consequences because we all have consequences. You have to pay the dues, whatever that is. But I want to help and understand what happened to it. So you hold them accountable for behavior, and you say things like, remember when we talked, when Mike had that earlier slide about the frontal lobe and about thinking and planning. Thank you, Mike. Planning, judgment, decision making. By your work with them and giving them the attunement and structure and moving them up the levels, you are building the ability to think about the future in them, because some of them impulses are so strong, they're going to do it again tomorrow. And so one thing I use often is the movie. I say, okay, Heather, let's play the movie. You feel like you were justified in doing that. I get that. You want to have fun. And you feel like it was a fun time. And then you landed in jail for a night with some smelly people. And didn't feel safe and you were scared and it was a cold mattress. Let's play the movie. If you don't change your behavior again, you do this next week, and then they put you in for 3 nights, and then you don't change your behavior and they put you in for 5 nights or put you in lockup. Kind of play the movie with me versus the maybe you learn how to have fun in other ways, and then you can stay at home. You got TV and a refrigerator and stuff. And I'm not kidding you. A lot of adolescents, it's the first time somebody empathic has ever walked through the future with them, and they kind of go, oh, it's starting to make a difference. So soft on the person, hard on the issue, help with the future.
Awesome. And John, probably the last question that we have time for. What would your model say? What would your approach be in working with teens that are lacking self-worth, lacking confidence, where either the parent or a therapist is just seeing that need for building up that confidence and self-esteem?
Am I talking to a therapist or a parent here, Mike?
To a therapist.
Helping a therapist to help with an adolescent who has self-esteem issues?
Yeah.
Okay. Number one, do not just think you got to encourage them and make them feel better. Wrong approach. You're putting Scotch tape onto a wound. You can tell them, I think you're a smart person all day, but inside they're going, well, yeah, you have to say that. They're paying you for that. So don't do that. You delve into the self-worth and talk about where it comes from, how they learned that, who told them that, why they believe that. And, you go into the depth of understanding this deepest level. And then when you say the magic word, this might take a session or two. So do I get it why you think you're such a loser? And they might go, no, you still don't get it. Okay, you keep digging. And then they finally go, yeah, I think you get it. Then you go, okay, open some feedback. Yeah, I don't feel that way about you. And you've earned the right to say that because you went to the depths. You understood the shame that happened. You understood the loss, the screw-ups, the mistakes. You understood the shaming parents or whatever happened, the lack of structure. I don't see that about you. And can I give you some feedback on how I see you? And then you just make distinctions between, yeah, you made major mistakes, but I really like a lot of things about you. And then you can go into the strengths, like you're smart and you work hard and you try, but don't out of our adolescent therapist anxiety of wanting to make people feel better, don't do the disservice to putting Scotch tape on a wound. Go into the wound, get them understood, get it empathized, and then begin building from there.
That's awesome. Great. Well, hey, I want to thank you so much, John, for sharing with us today, and want to be sure to encourage everybody to keep tuning in. We're going to send out additional invites for part 2 and part 3. Part 2 will be in September, part 3 in November, but just want to encourage you to stay tuned with these. I know that, for me personally, using this model and really looking at the underlying character issues that are driving the symptoms has made a huge difference in my practice, my work with teens, families, clients in general, also personally, and I just know in our work at Compass Rose what a difference maker it is. So I want to encourage people to stay tuned for following sessions. We look forward to bringing those to you, and thanks again, John, for being with us today.
You bet. Take care, guys.
All right. See you all next time. Thank you.